again. So we made our first video about how we got into the Oneness Pentecostal movement. I'm Nicole, by the way.
Dan.
Okay. And now I'd like to make a video kind of explaining how we got out.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. And I kind of wanted to start off a little bit by explaining why we're doing these videos.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want anybody to think that we're bitter or resentful, although we have gone through those emotions, I would say.
Yeah, right, when we left.
Right,
yeah,
which is why we haven't made videos up until now.
Yeah.
Right? But more so, we're commanded as Christians. Well, we're maybe not commanded, but we're supposed to call out false teachers. We're supposed to. Paul did it. He named 6 false teachers by name. We're supposed to be aware of false prophets. We're supposed to be aware of wolves in sheep's clothing. And in order to be aware of them, we need to know who they are and know why they are not true. And so our heart for these videos is really for the people who are still in it and the people who will get involved in it in the future. And if we can avoid,
we can help people avoid it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, by exposing them, the doctrines for who they are, and I love all the people most of the people I came into contact with, I really still care about, and we want to see everybody saved, right? And we want to see people come to a saving truth and to be free of the bondage that is false teaching.
Right. And, like I had mentioned in the first video, there's some people that could have a saving faith in there, but are confused like I was. But we don't know who they are.
Right.
And there could easily be, and I'm going to say that there's more people that have not come to that saving faith, I'm sure. And so we just want to make sure, and Jesus talked about, the fact that there's the blind leading the blind, and we don't, and so when we came out, there's some bitterness, we had to work through just because
we were
so attached to this, and we're so attached to the people, and there was a lot of conflict just coming out, and so we had to work through that, but ultimately we got to realize, these people are just as deceived as we were. They're in the same situation we were.
Right.
And so, if we can't, forgive people that are involved in it, for, maybe how they reacted to us leaving, and or
for teaching
forgive
us.
for the leadership teaching us wrong things, then really what's ultimately going on, we can't forgive ourselves either for
because we were
getting
perpetrators
involved.
of all of that as well.
We got deceived also, and we were doing the same things to try to teach others.
We were both leaders in our churches.
These false teachings. So
yeah,
it's just but we are concerned for people that are still in it.
Yeah.
And so.
And I think it's just important to talk about this openly, because one of the things when you're in the group, there's a lot of unspoken rules, and when something happens that is negative, so when some sin happens, or there's anything that would make the church look bad, you do not talk about it, because the last thing in the world you want is to make the church look bad, right? Because you want it to look perfect. Like you have this, you're supposed to make everything look perfect, so you don't want to turn anybody off from it, right? And I found that to be in direct conflict with the Bible, first of all, because we're supposed to call out sin, our own sin first and foremost, and especially sin within the church is to be dealt with publicly. And And if it doesn't, it creates more problems by sweeping it under the rug than if you were to call it out publicly. So I think it's important, especially those of us who have left, and particularly those who are still within it, that when something happens that is contrary to the Bible, that is sinful, it needs to be called out. And it needs to be done so publicly if you can't find a private resolution for it.
Yep. That's the first step. Yeah.
Right.
But,
so that's why we're talking about this. It's important.
So we wanted to talk about how we got out.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe in the next one we can talk about specific things that we experienced while we were in it. Yeah. Maybe. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of details we can go with that.
Between the two of us, I mean, there's like 20 years of crap we can talk about. So good stuff too. I mean, I would not go as far to say as everything is bad. Right. I made a lot of even lasting friendships within the church, and I had a lot of support in that church at a time when I needed support, and I needed a family, and I needed consistency, and I believe I got it from there. So I think God will use anything for His glory, right? And even just us meeting, we never would have met had we both not been in the UPC, because we went on the UPC dating
Which
site.
brings us to that period of time when both of us started to kind of lean more toward our own questions in our mind, mm-hmm. which it was around the time when both of us met.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of where we should probably start. Like, we met.
So we met and we got married.
We met on an Apostolic dating site.
ApostolicSinglesNetwork.com.
Yeah. Obviously, one of the things that was taught in the movement is you don't marry anybody that's not apostolic.
Right.
So, and that's the extent to which they took, the biblical teaching, you don't,
right. So
you're
in
not to be yoked together with an unbeliever.
Right.
Well, in their estimation, an unbeliever means someone who's not specifically apostolic.
Right. Because they might call other people Christians, they listen to Christian music, they read Christian books, right? But they don't really believe those people are Christians. They don't have the whole truth. So it's a lie. It really is. And I don't think people realize that that's what they're doing, but they are lying. They're lying to themselves and they're lying to everybody else around because they don't believe that they're Christians. I had a lot of Christian friends growing up that I did not believe were Christians. I was the Christian. I was the one with the truth, not them. Right? And although we listened to Christian music, I remember Pastor Eberly used to say, because he would read a whole bunch of books that weren't written by apostolics, and he would say, there's a lot of really good nuggets in that, right? You have to be careful. You have to know the doctrine so you're not deceived by what you read, but there's a lot of good to read in there,
too. Well, it can't be inspired by the Holy Spirit if they're not filled with the Spirit.
Right, exactly. So,
and
it's very
in their estimation, no one is
Yeah.
filled with the Spirit unless they speak in tongues.
And baptized in Jesus'
name. And they're baptized in Jesus' name, and they're living by the standards and all that, surely, because that's kind of like a fourth step, I guess, with the standards. Yeah,
because in order to keep your salvation, you have to do a whole bunch of other stuff. At any point, you can lose your salvation.
If you won't follow through with, wearing what you're supposed to wear and obeying your pastor blindly, and that kind of stuff, then you could be on your way to hell. Is what
and obedience
they'll tell you.
To the pastor is key.
Yeah.
There is no questioning your pastor. You are to obey your pastor regardless of whether you think he's wrong or right, because he is the one responsible for your soul, and he's the one who's going to have to answer for God whether he was right or wrong. Not you. You're going to have to answer to God for whether you obeyed your pastor or not. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what they believe, and that's what they taught. So you eventually just...
In every sphere of authority that's over you, if that authority is telling you to do something wrong, and to believe something that's wrong and to sin, your responsibility is to obey God rather than man.
Right.
So that includes your church leadership.
And if that person, if your pastor is, well, if he's not telling you biblical truth, he doesn't have any authority over you at all.
No, yeah.
Tell him where to shove it. I mean, honestly, that's kind of the
Well,
sorry. I'm a little feisty today. I was out there yelling at my chickens earlier. No.
But, so, yeah, us heading out, let's back up. We met on the Apostolic site, and after we had gotten married,
which we got married, we didn't really know each other very well. We didn't talk about a lot of these things, because on April 1st, he emailed me for the first time. It was a smiley face, right? It was just a smiley face. Or you said hi and a smiley face or something. But anyway, so we started emailing. Yeah. That was April 1st. We met in person in June and decided that day we were going to get married. And so we got married in November, and I moved down to North Carolina to be with him, and we didn't really date. We talked a lot, but we stuck to the talking points, right? We didn't have these hard conversations, and we had no idea, like I had no idea that he would have just a few months later started to believe something completely different, because he was on point, right? He was like dutiful Brother Dan, like, you know, he was the golden boy at his church, and I would say I was really good at following rules. I was still sinful because I was not saved. There was a lot of stuff I was doing that wasn't public, but, you know, like, I thought I was doing everything that I needed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
I tried my best.
So we, let's see.
So we got married.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, so all of a sudden, so I went from like working a full-time job and 2 part-time jobs and traveling all over Michigan to get to those jobs and just being busy all the time, right? Just constantly busy with church and work and friends and all that, to moving down to North Carolina and just being alone all day long in our condo. And he would be at work. And so I actually started watching like YouTube videos about cults, about the Amish. I don't know. I just came across like an Amish video and then Mormon videos, and it was just the inner workings of like the FLDS and things like that. And I started to really see similarities between those like fundamentalist Mormons and me. And also at the same time, a Pentecostal pastor in Kendallville had posted a video by Mark Driscoll. Now, he posted the video by Mark Driscoll, who is a Christian pastor, but only because he was talking against like Twilight or something. It was like the Twilight movies. He was preaching against those movies, right? Mm-hmm. So so he posted that video. Well, so I watched it and I was like, oh, this guy's really good. I agree with him. So I started watching more videos, and I actually started learning Christian doctrine for the first time, hearing that Trinitarians don't actually believe in 3 different gods. I had no idea, because we were taught that Trinitarians believed in 3 separate gods, not one. And I'm, what? They believe in one God? Like, this is crazy. And I remember even saying to Dan, I was reading a book by a Trinitarian woman, and she was talking about the Trinity, but she talked about how she believed in one God and that Jesus was God. And I'm like, what? I'm like, Dan, I think we believe the same thing as Trinitarians. And Dan was like, no, it's different. I'm like, no, but look, this is what she says, and it's the same thing. And he's like, no, you have to have the revelation of who Jesus is, right? And I'm like, oh, the revelation of who Jesus is. Okay, well, this just seems very familiar, you know? And so just things like that started coming up. And then personally, I was really unhappy at his church down in North Carolina. The people were really awesome. I mean, people welcomed me with open arms, so that was not even even a problem, but it was just vastly different than what I was used to. And he was the youth pastor, and I kept getting in trouble as like the youth pastor's wife. So like I got in trouble because I was having a conversation on Facebook with a guy friend of mine openly in public on my public Facebook. And I got in trouble because I was having this conversation. And just a conversation that, I mean, anybody could see. Nothing to hide here, right? Yeah. And I mean, actually, I think like when I was having that conversation, you were sitting in bed with me. Like, but anyway, but no, I got in trouble because of that. And then I got in trouble because I was being too friendly with the youth, which I was 24. And technically, like, up until that point, I had been a part of the youth group in my local churches because they keep you a part of the youth group until you're married, you know? And so I guess I was being too friendly. I wasn't acting like the second lady of the church should act, is what I was told. Right after we got married, I didn't go. When we came back from our honeymoon, it was like Saturday night. We got home from New York City, and I didn't go to church in the morning. I was tired. I was really tired, and I was just run down, and I didn't feel good. And Dan said I could stay home and get some sleep, and he would go to church. Well, I got in trouble for not going to church that day, right? And then there was this singing. You guys had like a singing clinic. It was Songfest or something.
Okay.
And I didn't know that Songfest was such a big deal. I just thought it was a clinic that you guys went and sang, like you learned how to sing. And I'm not a singer, so I didn't really see why I should go to this.
You're supposed to do everything all together.
Right.
Especially if you're, you know, if the youth pastor and his wife, or especially a youth pastor and his wife, you know,
right,
be doing everything.
Well, I didn't have a handbook.
Everything.
And so I stayed home that weekend because I was like, I've got a lot to do around the condo. We're newlyweds. It was a couple weeks after we got married, and we didn't live together, and I didn't even move there until a couple weeks before we got married. So I just had a lot to do, and I didn't really want to go. And I got in trouble that I didn't go because I wasn't there supporting my husband and what he wanted to do. And I'm like a public figure now, you know, and it was very much about appearances. So I was just really, I just felt awful. I felt like I wasn't any good for anything, and I felt like I wasn't good enough for you. And I started to have a lot of doubts about even just our marriage, because I would try to express how I felt to you about the pastor and things like that, and you would just be like, we're not talking about this. We don't complain about, I'm not going to be married and complain about church all the time, you know? And so it was just different, and it was hard. And I'm sure you had the same kind of questions about, did we marry, like, oh no, did I marry the right person that I had?
Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, I'm trying to think like how this is leading toward.
Just because I was so unhappy, and so it was one of the things that I think for me is part of what got me. Like, I was just by myself all day, and I was watching YouTube videos and sermons and stuff from Mark Driscoll, which led me to listen to
leading
sermons.
into questioning doctrine and stuff, and seeing the abuses. Obviously, you've experienced some abuses in your other church, and then here's an example of those kind of abuses being carried out in the church she was now being brought into in our marriage. And so these are examples of spiritual abuse in the church, leading to questions of, you know, is this right?
So when I got married, I thought, like, part of, I would say, the spiritual abuse that I endured in the church I grew up in was that my parents didn't go to church. So the pastor took it upon himself to be my father, right? And he would call me daughter, although I never went to his house, and I never got invited over for dinner or anything, right? Never saw them outside of church at all. But I would be told, well, you need to obey me like you would your father. I'm your spiritual father. And, I mean, yeah. And that was a lot of years of getting called at home to tell me what I did wrong, getting called into the office, just completely by myself with nobody to defend me or to stick up for me, and just being broken down over a lot of years of being controlled. So that was the whole I'm your father. And then I think, well, now I'm married and I don't have to do that anymore because I have a husband to protect me and to take care of me. And now all of a sudden I'm being abused spiritually because I'm not being a good enough wife. Right? And so that was really hard. That was really, really hard. And I would go to work. I had a 6-hour round trip twice a week drive to work. And I would listen to Christian radio, which in the middle of North Carolina in the boondocks, you've got talk radio, right? You don't have regular radio. So I was listening to apologetics. I was listening to Wretched Radio, and just hearing like Orthodox Christian doctrine for the first time ever and going, wow, this is pretty interesting. This makes a lot of sense. And then at the same time, your dad had started to get sick, and my aunt was dying. My mom was taking care of her. She was dying of cancer. And my mom, when she was there, my aunt was Catholic. So my mom thought, well, I need to teach her the Apostolic doctrine that my daughter believes. So she was talking to my pastor from Jackson over the phone, and she had said to me that she told him that she couldn't baptize Aunt Sharon because Aunt Sharon had tubes and stuff, right? So she couldn't submerge her in water. And so he told her something about the Old Testament, how they used to sprinkle, and that it would be okay for her to do that for my Aunt Sharon. And I remember going, what? No way. And my mom wouldn't have been able to come up with that on her own, right? And I'm like, what in the world? And so my mom baptized her by sprinkling her. And I'm like, there is no way. And then I guess she had said to him, I don't know how to get her to speak in tongues. I can't do that because you have to get people to do that, right? And if you're just there by yourself and you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to be able to get them to do that. And he told her that God knows the heart. And I was like, what? What? God didn't know my heart, And I'm like, what in the world? And so that got me thinking. And then your dad got sick. He got diagnosed with ALS, and he was losing the ability to talk. And we started going, oh no, he's not going to be able to speak in tongues because he can't talk. And so that got me thinking too, like, well, is that even, like, how does that work, right? If somebody physically can't. And so then when Aunt Sharon died, well, and in the middle of all of this, we made friends. I'm an interpreter for the deaf, and like that was my thing, right? In the Pentecostal church, is like I wanted to save all the deaf people, and I wanted to interpret for them, and was really heavily involved in deaf ministry. And we met some deaf people at Bed Bath & Beyond when we were doing our registry for our wedding, and we invited them to church, and I was like the only interpreter in town at that point that was really worth much. And so they came to our church. Well, they were Baptist missionaries, and they were very faithful people. And they kind of didn't see through the whole doctrine. They were just happy to have an interpreter. And so we would go out to eat with them, and we would invite them over to the house and everything, and they would talk to us about Christ. And we didn't really have much. I didn't have much to say because I wanted to listen to them talk about Jesus. And they just made him look and sound so beautiful and wonderful. And
just examples like
just
that throughout the years.
Faithful Christians.
You have to be like, well, surely, these people have been born again. There's various people, that I came in contact with where it's like, it made me think, I don't know what to think about this. I mean, here's what we're being taught, but one of many examples, and that was toward the end.
And then my Aunt Sharon passed away. Oh, well, so with Vincent and Diane, the deaf people, you know, I just kept thinking, like, how could they not be Christians, you know? And they just had so much more of what I wanted and what I was looking for in my life. And like I said, they just made Jesus look beautiful. And so then Aunt Sharon passed away, and it was our last church service before we had to go up to Michigan. And I was talking to the pastor's wife, and I said, yeah, my mom baptized her, but she didn't speak in tongues. And she said, oh, honey, you never know what happens in that conversation with God at the last moments. And I was like, you're right.
It's kind of the same.
Yeah.
God knows your heart. Like,
but wait a second, because wait a second, is this the truth or is this not the truth? And I had been praying on my way. I was listening to like Wretched Radio, and Todd Friel is like a straight shooter, right? Yeah. And he just makes things so easy to understand, and he puts things into perspective. And I remember praying, like, just having some doubts about speaking in tongues. That was my only doubt. Okay. I didn't doubt oneness. I didn't doubt standards. I started to doubt speaking in tongues for salvation. And just for salvation. Not that they were real or not real. It was only, well, do we really need to speak in tongues to be saved? Was my question. And I remember praying and on my way and like specifically praying, God, if this is the truth, I want to be able to proclaim it without question. And I need you to show me. I need you to show me that this is the truth or if this is not the truth. And I prayed, you know, Jesus, if this is not the truth, it's going to be hard, but I'm going to accept it. But if it's not the truth, I need you to show Dan, because I can't do this on my own. I was so afraid if I told him anything of what I was going through or what I was thinking about, that he would want to divorce me, because I'd be a backslider, right?
I was already thinking the
everybody
same
that
things.
had gotten, and everybody that had gotten divorced in the church that I knew of divorced because one person was apostolic and one person wasn't. Like, I mean, that was, well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people, this is something that they got divorced over. And so I was really nervous. I didn't want him to think I was a backslider. So then, well, go ahead and talk about yours, and then we'll talk about our drive up to Michigan.
I will say what happened during that and then back up.
Okay, hold on one second. I'm going to stop the video because we're at the 30 mark, and I'm going to do a part 2. So that was part 1 of Nicole's beginning journey out.
And we're going to say, don't tell the pastor to shove it.
Don't do that.
Yeah, not exactly that, but...
Well, it just depends on the one. I don't know.
I just wanted to put that out there. You can tell me he's wrong. But, yeah, tell him. Don't tell him to shove it, though.
Well, they call... look at what they call... I mean, vipers. You are... I mean, they call them some really bad names. I think saying shove it isn't that bad.
In a certain context, you know, there might be an appropriate
Maybe
time
don't make
to say
that your first remark.
Right, there you go.
But keep it in your arsenal in case you need it.
You might need to have to say that.
Okay. Okay.
All right.